Hello, fellow students. Welcome to the course of Introduction to Human Rights in Arab Culture. My name is Yusra Taha. I am an assistant lecturer in the Faculty of Economics and Political Science. I will be assisting Dr. Ayman Al-Dusu'i in explaining this course to you and providing all of the explanation needed for the materials of this course. The first lecture that we have today is an overview and an introduction to what the course will be about, what are its main topics, what are its objectives, what are the main ideas that we are going to cover, and what would be the structure of the course. This course is taught, as I said, by Dr. Ayman Al-Dusu'i. He is a professor of political science in the Faculty of Economics and Political Science. The title of the course is Human Rights in Arab Culture. And you will find the email of Dr. Ayman Al-Dusu'i written in front of you on the slide. Dr. Ayman will be providing lectures during the designated times as specified in the course schedule, and office hours will be upon agreement. You can send an email to Dr. Ayman Al-Dusu'i asking for an appointment, and by agreement he will give you the time needed for if you have any questions or any comments after the lecture. You are more than welcome to contact him through email and he will reply to all of your questions. If we move on immediately to an introduction about the course, we must say that human rights have become now the signature ideals of all our times. Human rights has been a very important topic since even before World War II. They have become an integral part of our vision of how the world ought to be. And they have become recognized as part of the international law, regional law, and domestic law around the world. Human rights have become a fact of life. Most countries, whether democratic or non-democratic, they claim that they pay great attention to the human rights of their citizens, that they follow the international laws, and they follow the regional laws and the international jurisdictions about what human rights are and how they should be respected. Both democratic and non-democratic countries are very keen in assuring the international community that they provide human rights to their people and that they respect them and that they reflect them in their internal local laws. Human rights are also at the center of the activities of major international organizations like the United Nations, Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders, and many others. Most of the international organizations all over the world pay great attention to the respect of human rights. The United Nations has many bodies that are dedicated only to guarantee that those human rights are respected and implemented throughout the world. Like, for instance, the UNHCR for the Council for Refugees, the United Nations High Council for Refugees, which is concerned mainly of the rights of refugees all over the world. The World Food Program, for example, that is affiliated for the human rights, ensures that the right of proper food is provided to all humans all over the world. Many different bodies like the UNICEF, for instance, is concerned mainly with protecting the rights of children all over the world. The UNESCO, as another example, a different body of the United Nations, which is mainly responsible for securing and ensuring the protection of the rights of education and culture, and protecting the natural and historical heritage of all nations as to be protected. Amnesty International, as one non-governmental human rights organization, is concerned mainly with the rights of speech and rights of freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of gathering. It looks for the rights of prisoners. Doctors Without Borders is one international non-governmental organization that is concerned mainly with providing the right of health and healthcare and protecting people's health under, especially under conflicts, and ensuring that they get the proper medication, the proper medical care throughout the different countries of the world, especially the poor countries or countries that are caught in conflict situations. Even though it might be assumed that human rights is not debatable, human rights is an issue that should actually enjoy the agreement of most of the countries of the world, most of the international actors. However, the topic of human rights is highly complex, and it is looked at from very different perspective, and different countries have different understanding and different interpretation to what human rights are. Different countries give more priority to some human rights over other human rights. You would find some countries giving more priorities to economic rights, to the rights of access to employment or healthcare or education, over rights of freedom of press, freedom of speech, political participation, and political expression. So different countries enter into a lot of conflicts concerning human rights of each other. Some countries would consider the human rights of its citizens as an internal affair, and would refuse the interference of other countries in determining whether they are respecting the human rights of their people or not. Of course, and there are many difficult questions raised by the issue of human rights, as in how countries define human rights, what kind of human rights have priority over other human rights, and whether or not all human rights should be given the same weight or not, whether or not different countries have the right to comment on the status of human rights of other countries, or whether this is considered an internal affair and countries are not allowed to interfere or to express their opinion concerning the status of human rights of other countries. The course of the course that we have, and the course that we are going to address, is titled Human Rights in the Arab Culture. This course provides an introduction to the question of human rights, with special focus on human rights in the Arab world. So the course mainly starts by trying to define human rights and describe its characteristics, and at the same time it will start to focus and reflect on the nature of human rights in the Arab and Muslim culture, and how it is similar or different than the international experience with regards to human rights. The course will also allow students to explore various types of classifications of human rights, with special focus on minority rights. So in addition to addressing different definitions and different explanations, and how different countries and how different international documents address the meaning of human rights and what it is, and in addition to describing its characteristics and what it is about, and we will also address the different classifications and the different types of human rights, and we will focus mainly on the rights of minorities in different parts of the world. The course also demonstrates how human rights can be justified, in the sense that we are going to address the justification of human rights, like why human rights is important, why countries should start respecting and implementing the human rights of its people, and the different people all over the world. What are the reasons behind giving human rights such importance, and why do countries, especially the Western democratic, most developed countries, try to or give such a big priority to human rights all over the world. The course will also address how human rights are internationally protected. What are the guarantees that such human rights will be respected and will be provided to different people all over the world. In addition to that, the course will explain why human rights are considered universal, why all humans all over the world should be able and should have the ability to enjoy those international and universal human rights, and that those rights should not be divided. No people in certain countries should enjoy those rights while others in different countries should be deprived from them. In addition to all of this, the course will also address the impact and the effect of globalization on human rights. How globalization made the issue of human rights a global issue and not just a local issue in a certain country. How globalization have gave the world the right to address human rights violations all over the world and not just in certain parts of the world. How globalization and the communication revolution has made violations very obvious, and has made the world aware of violations that are in different parts of the world, and how globalization has given the right to the citizens of the world to have an opinion about such violation, to condemn such violation, and to demand action regarding those violations which are happening at maybe a distance of thousands and thousands of kilometers away from those people. In addition to all of this, special attention will be paid to human rights in the Arab world. How all this resonates to the Arab world and Middle Eastern countries. What's the nature of human rights in the Middle East? How it is in the Arab world? How it is represented? How it is protected? To what extent countries in the Arab world adopt human rights laws and protocols, and how they are represented in those countries. It is very important as well to refer to the main topics or the main topics and ideas that we are going to address in this course. This course is going to, as we said, address the definition of human rights, the characteristics of human rights, the history of human rights as a concept and as a developmental and accumulative process, and how this led to a new and contemporary idea of human rights. We will also address the classifications of and types of human rights. We will address the justification of human rights and why they are important, and why it is important to adopt human rights laws throughout the world. Also, we will address human rights in Islam and in the Arab culture, and the international human rights protection, and the international documents that are guarantees for human rights protection and implementation all over the world. Moreover, the syllabus or the course will address not just theoretical concepts like the one we have explained before in terms of characteristics or justification or definition or classifications or how the status of human rights in the Arab world and the international community is represented, but the course will also have a practical part of it, or a practical section of it, in the sense that the course will also focus on some practical examples from the region, from different regions all over the world. We will address certain different examples from Europe, from Africa, and from the Arab world about how certain violations have taken place, how the international community and the regional community dealt with those violations, where those violations were addressed, were they addressed in regional or international organizations, whether they were handled on a state level or on an international level. We will also have some Egyptian cases in protecting human rights and specific examples of addressing such rights in different parts of the world. In order also to address those topics, there are certain objectives that we need to achieve by the end of this course. We aim that by the end of this course, the students will have achieved a certain level of understanding to what human rights is, to have a certain familiarity with the basic concepts and elements and types of human rights. So we need the students after the course to be aware and to understand what human rights are, what are the different types of human rights, why human rights is important, and how human rights is represented not just on an international level, but also on a regional level and on a local level. We want the students to understand how human rights are addressed in international organizations, how human rights are addressed in the Arab world, how human rights are addressed in Egypt, what is the contribution of Egypt and the Arab world to the issue of human rights, and how they are protected. We also want the students to be able to learn to read and interpret primary and secondary sources of human rights. So by the end of this course, we want you as students to be able to handle some primary and secondary, some basic documents that address the issue of human rights, some basic documents that deal with the issue of human rights, that explain the issue of human rights. We also want the students to be able to engage in discussions related to everyday life, to everyday issues of human rights. So whenever you are in a gathering, or with a group of friends, or in a meeting, or in an outing, we want you to come out of this course having a certain idea about the issue of human rights, so that you would be able to understand and engage in a discussion or engage in a debate where you can offer your opinion about maybe human rights policies that are taking place in certain countries in order to protect a certain right, or you would be able to present your opinion about a human right violation that is taking place in some part of the world, and you can give an opinion about it and have a stance about it. We also want the students to be able to develop analytical and critical thinking skills about various human rights issues. So by the end of this course, and by the end of addressing the different topics that we have mentioned, we want the students to develop some certain analytical and skills to enable them to analyze different events, different human rights violations all over the world, to enable them to have a critical eye on those violations, to enable them to give an objective and unbiased opinion about those violations based on their own understanding and their own knowledge that they gained from addressing the definition of human rights and its different characteristics and its different types, and how it is essential and how it is important. So based on all that, we aim from this course to enable the students to have a general overview and a general idea about the issue of human rights, and how they can add to the discussion and the debate about human rights in different parts of the world. A quick idea about the course and its objectives and all its requirements, let's take a more detailed look about the course through its course outline. As you can see, it begins with a course description indicating that it aims at introducing students to the concepts of human rights. It provides an introduction to the question of human rights with special focus on human rights in the Arab culture. The course will also help you determine different types of human rights and the measures secured for their protection. The course will also engage in a lot of debate in relevance to the international idea of human rights compared to the local idea in different Arab societies and culture. If we move on to check the actual contents of the course, we will see that the course is divided into several weeks. in week 1, it will mainly be an overview of the course and the definitions of human rights. Week 2 will mainly focus on the sense of human rights and its main characteristics. As we move on to week 3, we will focus on the history of human rights and the contemporary idea of human rights, how it was shaped in the past and how it developed throughout the years. That is, of course, after we highlight the different definitions of human rights, how it is addressed in the United Nations Charter, how it is addressed in different other human rights documents, and after we discuss the characteristics of human rights, whether they are universal or local, whether they are collective or individual, and so on and so forth. We will then move on to in week 4 and week 5, we will focus on the classification of human rights. There are and the 3 different kinds of classifications to human rights. Week 6 will focus mainly on justifying human rights and why is human rights important, why do countries make sure that the human rights are respected, why is the international community interested in guaranteeing the rights of individuals and human rights through all over the world. Week 7, we will start then shifting the focus or the lens to Islam and to the Arab culture. So this will be the start of understanding human rights in Islam and in the Arab culture and the Arab world, and how it has been addressed in our region. Week 8 will be the midterm exam. Week 9, from week 9 to week 11, we are going to address different topics, and it will mainly be dealt with regarding human rights protection on the international level, through international instruments, through the international institutions, and the regional protection of human rights. So in week 9, it will mainly be the focus on the international instruments that are used to protect human rights all over the world, which would include the International Human Rights Law, the United Nations Charter, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the covenants, the International Covenant on the Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and lastly the United Nations Conventions on Human Rights. Week 10 will be focusing on the international structures and institutions that protect human rights, mainly the United Nations, the United Nations Conventions Mechanism, the International Criminal Court, and the international non-governmental organizations that are concerned with protecting human rights. Week 11, we will mainly focus on the regional institutions and preparations and laws that are specific to each region of the world, which are dedicated to the protection of human rights. We will study the instruments and the institutions in Europe that focus on the protection of human rights. We will also address the same in Africa, in the Arab world, and in Egypt. Week 12, we will address several practical examples of human rights protections and human rights violations. And week 13 to 14, it will be presentations for your class work. The course will be evaluated through several methods. The midterm exam is graded from 20 points, participation and quizzes 10 points, group presentation 20 points, and the final exam is graded from 50 points. So the whole course collectively is graded from 100 points. According to we will be using different teaching methodologies to deliver the information to you. It will be through direct lectures, class and group discussions, videos and electronic material placed on your electronic platforms, and you will be asked to to make some certain presentations and provide a certain research paper. Following below is a list of sources for your studying. The first primary resource is collective materials done by Dr. Ayman Dusui, the professor of the subject. It's called Introduction to Human Rights, and it's compiled materials. We were going to address it shortly, and it will be provided on your electronic platform. The rest are various journal articles and books. and book chapters that we will accordingly make them available for you on your electronic as well, on your electronic platform as well. It's very important to note that plagiarism is not accepted. Plagiarism is basically the copying and pasting. You are not allowed, and it's not going to be accepted that you copy and paste material from other sources without referencing them. If you're going to quote something from another resource, you have to put it between inverted commas to inverted commas, and you have to state clearly that this is quoted literally from another source. Whatever you rely on, whether books, internet materials, journal articles, videos, interviews, documentaries, whatever, you have to list them in your bibliography or your resources cited. Everything has to be paraphrased, and your own words need to be used. Any text or ideas, images, or any kind of knowledge that is present in your papers without referencing and it's not your original idea, this is considered like copyright theft, and you will it will be considered as plagiarism, and your work will and you will lose a lot of marks because of that. So you need to make sure that all of the papers, all of your assignments, your presentations, they are your own work, your own words, and if you rely on any other sources, they have to be cited and mentioned in your references. Okay, if you move now to the material, this is the compiled material that is prepared by Dr. Ayman El-Dusouqi. It is the primary textbook. It's your primary source of studying for the course. It is titled Introduction to Human Rights, and it is divided into several chapters that are in coordinates with the contents of your course. So chapter 1 deals with the contemporary idea of human rights. Chapter 2 deals with the concept of human rights and its definition. Chapter 3 is about making sense of human rights. Chapter 4, the classification of human rights. Chapter 5, minority rights as human rights. Chapter 6, justifying human rights. Chapter 7, human rights protection. Chapter 8 deals with the question of whether human rights are universal or not. And Chapter 9 deals with human rights in the Arab world. The compiled material ends with a conclusion about the relationship between globalization and human rights. And in the compiled references as well, you will find a set of appendices that will be very relevant to you in your study. It basically includes the frameworks, the international frameworks and conventions that represent the sources of human rights internationally all over the world. So you will find the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you will find the Arab Charter on Human Rights that was issued in 2004, you will find the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and you'll also find the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. So this is basically your material, the main material that you're going to study from, and it will be provided either in paper or electronically on your electronic platforms. So I hope by now that everything about the course is clear and obvious. To wrap up, we've gone through different aspects of the course. We've addressed through the PowerPoint presentations the different contents of the course. You now know the professor of the course, you know his email, you can contact him anytime you want. We've addressed the introduction about human rights, the overview of the course, the topics that we are going to address, the regions that we are going to cover, and how we relate this to our region in the Arab world, to Egypt, and the different examples that we're going to address. We've explained the objectives of the course, and we have as well address the syllabus, the contents of the course, and in the end we have also referred to the material of the course. As I've said, the material will be available on your electronic platform and in paper as well. Again, I remind you of who I am. I'm Yusra Taha, the assistant lecturer in the Faculty of Economics and Political Science in the Political Science Department. My contact email is ytaha@feps.edu.eg. Again, it's ytaha, T-A-H-A, all one word, at feps.edu.eg. I will be assisting Dr. Ayman El-Dsuqi and Dr. Rehan Behi in teaching this course electronically through providing the electronic material online. If you need to contact me anytime, or if you need to further clarification, further understanding of the material, my office hours is Sunday and Tuesday. I'm available in the Faculty of Economics and Political Science in the TA room from 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. If you need anything, you can send me an email setting an appointment, or you can walk in at any time, as I mentioned, Sunday and Tuesday from 9:30 in the morning to 2:30 in the afternoon. And again, my email is ytaha@feps.edu.eg. Contact me anytime if you need more clarification, more explanation, more examples. If you need help with your assignments or presentations of the course, I will be more than glad to provide you with the help you need. Thank you so much, and looking forward to the next section, which will be about the definitions of human rights. See you in the next section. Bye.